Justin's greatest joy had always been restoring old cars breathing life back into machines everyone else had given up on. On his rare days off, he disappeared into his garage, emerging covered in grease, sweat, and quiet satisfaction. But on one of those afternoons, with his arms buried deep inside an engine, his phone rang. It was his wife's voice, shaking, terrified, saying she had just checked their bank account while traveling, and it was completely empty. Justin felt the ground tilt under him. He tried calling the bank, but every attempt failed. Heart racing, still smeared in grease, he jumped into his truck and rushed to the branch in desperation. Inside the elite marble-floored bank, a manager was entertaining Beth, a wealthy socialite, when Justin burst in, breathless and trembling. "I just want to check my balance," he pleaded. The manager and Beth looked him up and down, dirty jeans, oily hands, and burst into laughter, assuming he was a broke mechanic who didn't belong there. Their sneers cut deeper than they realized. To mock him further, the manager pulled up his account, ready to prove Justin had nothing. But the moment the screen loaded, both he and Beth froze. Millions lined across the display. The manager stumbled over apologies. Beth's face went pale, and Justin, standing there humiliated despite his wealth, felt something inside him harden. They had judged him by his grease, not his worth, and he wasn't going to let that be the end of the story. Curious to know what Justin did next and how his revenge changed everything, let's dive deeper. But before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Now let's understand how this story really began. Justin Cole's hands were stained black with engine grease, the kind that seeped into the creases of his palms no matter how many times he scrubbed them. He sat half under the frame of a 1967 Mustang Fastback, the metal still warm from the summer sun bleeding through the open garage. The air carried the scent of motor oil, old rubber, and the faint sweetness of the peach candles his wife Sarah loved to light at night. The radio played softly in the corner, an old Marvin Gaye track that always made him hum along. Working on cars calmed him. It reminded him of childhood, of the cracked driveway where he and his father fixed up junkyard engines just for the challenge. Back then, they didn't have much. Now, he had more than he'd ever dreamed, yet it never pulled him away from the things that grounded him. He tightened a bolt, wiped sweat from his temple with the back of his wrist, and reached for the next tool. That's when his phone vibrated on the tool cart beside him. He almost ignored it. He always ignored calls when he was deep into a restoration, but the screen lit up with one name that instantly made something inside him freeze. It was Sarah. He slid out from beneath the Mustang, leaving a streak of grease across the concrete. He picked up the phone. "Hey, beautiful," her voice cut through him, trembling, thin, nothing like the warm steadiness he knew so well. "Justin, the account, it's empty." For a moment, he didn't breathe. "What do you mean empty?" His voice dropped, steady but edged with fear. "All of it. Justin, everything is gone. I checked twice. I called the bank, but no one answered. I don't know what happened." He grabbed the rag on the workbench, wiping his hands but only smearing the grease deeper. "Sarah, stay calm, okay? I'm sure it's a mistake, a glitch." He forced confidence into his tone, even though something icy coiled inside his chest. "I'll call them right now. I'll handle it." She sniffed softly, a quiet, broken sound. "Please hurry. I'm on it." He hung up and immediately dialed the bank. Automated system. Dialed 2. Dialed 6. Hold. Tinny piano music. A voice repeating that all representatives are currently assisting other customers. He hung up, redialed, again. Each attempt ended the same way. No real person, no answers, no clarity. 5 calls, 5 failures. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. Money disappearing wasn't just an inconvenience, it was threat. It was everything he'd built. Everything he'd protected. It was his employees, the company, the future he and Sarah had worked so long to secure. He couldn't sit still. He grabbed his keys, slid into the Mustang, unfinished or not, and sped out of the garage, gravel spitting behind him. His shirt was smeared with grease, his jeans marked with stains. He didn't stop to wash up, didn't think, didn't care. All he knew was he needed answers, and he needed them now. Whitmore Private Bank towered like a monument to generational wealth, white marble pillars, spotless glass, gold-trimmed signage. A place designed to signal who belonged and who didn't. Justin pulled into the circular drive, stepped out of the car, and walked across the pristine entrance rug, still breathing fast. By the moment he entered the lobby, he felt dozens of eyes flick toward him, linger on the grease on his shirt, the stains on his hands, the streak of oil across his cheek. Conversations quieted. Perfume-scented air thickened. He didn't care. Not today. Behind the reception desk, bank manager Derek Thompson sat with a woman Justin recognized instantly. Beth Morrison. The heiress. The socialite. The woman whose world revolved around appearances, charity galas, and curated perfection. They were sharing a plate of catered pastries, laughing about something, both dressed in crisp designer clothes. Justin approached the counter, his voice controlled but strained. "I just want to check my balance. Please, it's urgent." Derek looked up, took in the grease, the clothes, the intensity in Justin's eyes. Then he exchanged a glance with Beth, a glance that carried an entire conversation of judgment. Beth lifted a hand to her mouth and whispered loudly enough for half the room to hear. "Does he think this is a check cashing store?" A few snickers. Someone coughed to hide a laugh. Justin's jaw tightened. He swallowed the humiliation burning at the back of his throat. Derek gave him a patronizing smile. "Sir, perhaps you're looking for the branch on 5th Street. I bank here," Justin said, voice low. "My account. Please just check." Derek sighed as if inconvenienced, then typed slowly, dramatically, as if humoring a man who clearly didn't belong. Beth leaned closer, smirking, watching his hands dance over the keyboard. Then the screen loaded, and everything changed. Derek's face froze, his humor drained. His eyes widened so quickly it was almost comical. Beth leaned over to see what he saw. Then her expression fell apart entirely, laughter dying in her throat, replaced by a rigid, horrified stillness. The number glowed brightly on the screen. $47,300,000. Oh, silence rippled across the lobby. Justin felt the eyes again, but this time they weren't mocking. They were stunned, unsure, thrown off balance. Derek's voice cracked. Mr. Cole? Justin Cole? Justin met his gaze, calm now, controlled in a way that made Derek swallow hard. "Now," Justin said quietly, "do I have your attention?" Derek stammered. Beth stood frozen, her polished veneer shattered. He muttered apologies. Tripped over them, really. But Justin didn't respond. The damage had been done. The laughter still echoed in his chest. As he turned to leave, he heard Beth whisper in panic, "Oh my God, do you know who that is?" Derek shakily pulled up something on his phone. Justin Cole, CEO of Tech Vantage. Forbes 30 under 30. Justin paused at the door just long enough for Beth to meet his eyes. And the look he gave her, not angry, not even triumphant, made her shiver. He said nothing. He simply walked out. But the chill that moved through Derek and Beth told them everything they needed to know. This wasn't over. Silence pressed into the lobby with the heaviness of a falling curtain, thick, suffocating, absolute. It wasn't the kind of silence that simply filled a room. It was the kind that owned it, swallowing every breath, every twitch, every unspoken thought. Even the faint hum of the ceiling lights seemed to dim beneath its weight. Derek Thompson stared at the screen as if it were an accusation written in fire. All the color drained from his face, leaving his skin the pale, splotchy shade of someone who had just watched their life tilt off its axis. Mr. Cole?" he managed, hardly recognizing the sound of his own voice. "Justin Cole?" His lips quivered, just barely, as if the very act of speaking held a danger he wasn't sure he could contain. Beth Morrison, who moments earlier had been reveling in smug delight, lifted her impeccably manicured hand to her mouth in a sharp, reflexive motion. The soft tap of her gemstone ring against her front teeth was the only noise, and it rang out with the crispness of panic. Justin drew in one slow breath. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, far too quiet for the tension that electrified the room. "Now," he said, his tone low and steady. "Do I have your attention?" Derek's mouth opened, closed, opened again. He swallowed hard, the movement visible in the tight knot of his throat. "Sir, Mr. Colai, I am so deeply sorry," he stammered. "I didn't realize, I swear, if I had known who you... I should have, I didn't know." Justin didn't blink. He didn't soften. The expression on his face was controlled, unreadable, the kind that forced a person to confront their own shame without a single raised word. Beth stood rooted to the polished marble floor. Her earlier smirk, a polished, practiced curl of superiority, was gone. In its place was something brittle, almost ghostly. Her eyes darted between Justin and Derek, wide and shimmering like a child caught breaking something precious. The lobby, with all its marble brilliance and gold-trimmed decor, felt suddenly cheap. Justin didn't take his eyes off Derek. "Just tell me what happened to my account." Derek tore his gaze away from Justin long enough to look at the screen again. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as if afraid to touch it, afraid of what more he might uncover. There was a security flag he managed, a technical glitch. Your account was temporarily frozen for verification. It wasn't unauthorized access. No theft, just a review protocol that triggered automatically. Justin's jaw tightened. His shoulders eased only a fraction, just enough to show that he believed the explanation, but not enough to release anger or hurt. "So my money is safe," he said softly. "Yes, sir. Absolutely safe. Completely intact." He nodded once. But the relief didn't soften the hollowness in his chest. What had happened here? That had nothing to do with glitches or security protocols. They had laughed at him, mocked him, dismissed him, not because of anything he had said or done, but because he showed up covered in grease. Because they assumed someone like him didn't belong here, not in their polished, curated world of silent discrimination wrapped in polite smiles. The damage was done, and the damage had a voice, a laugh, a smirk, a tone. He could still hear it. Justin exhaled slowly, forcing the breath through lungs that felt too tight. He began to turn away, ready to leave this suffocating lobby and the people who had shown him exactly who they were. But as he took his first step, Beth's whisper cut through the air, thin, shaky, not nearly as quiet as she hoped. "Oh my God," she breathed. "Do you know who that is?" Her voice carried just enough panic to ripple across the room. Derek fumbled for his phone, unlocking it with shaking hands. He typed something into the search bar with a frantic urgency. A second later, he held the screen toward Beth, her glossy lips parted in stunned disbelief. There, in bold letters, Justin Cole, CEO of Tech Vantage Industries Forbes, 30 under 30A. Photo of him in a tailored charcoal suit filled the top of the screen clean-cut. Poised, the face of a man who commanded boardrooms and multi-million-dollar contracts. Not the man covered in grease standing 3 feet away. Justin paused at the glass doors. He turned, slowly. His eyes found Beth's. Something flickered across her face, a shiver, a collapse of certainty. A recognition that whatever she believed about him minutes ago had been so small, so ignorant, so blindly rooted in the kind of privilege that never expected consequences. Justin didn't glare at her. He didn't smirk. He didn't offer even the satisfaction of anger. He simply looked at her with a calm that cut deeper than rage ever could. He held her gaze for one breath, then another, and then he walked out. No dramatic words. No parting line, only silence. But the silence he left behind was nothing like the one that had crushed the lobby moments earlier. This silence was heavy with realization and understanding shared between Derek and Beth like an unspoken confession. They had crossed a line, and both of them felt it. Both of them knew. This wasn't over. Justin didn't change out of his work clothes when he got home. The dark grease stains still clung to his shirt, smudging across the fabric like bruises he hadn't yet acknowledged. His hands rested loosely on the sides of his laptop, fingertips hovering as though touching the keyboard required a strength he hadn't returned to yet. The familiar scent of motor oil still clung to him, a reminder of the peace he usually found in restoring old engines' peace that had been violently interrupted hours earlier. The house was warm, quiet, the kind of quiet he usually found comforting. Tonight, it felt hollow. When Sarah walked in from her trip, suitcase wheels softly rolling over the hardwood floor, she stopped in the doorway to his office. She didn't speak at first. She just looked at him, his slumped posture, the flatness in his eyes, the shadows beneath them. Something in her chest constricted. "Baby, what happened?" she whispered. Justin lifted his gaze slowly, as if pulling it up from deep water. His expression wasn't angry. It wasn't even sad. It was emptied, drained, as if the bank lobby had taken something from him he didn't realize was vulnerable until it was already gone. "The money's back," Sarah said gently, stepping closer. "But you look—" She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Justin leaned back in his chair, fingers loosely interlaced, staring past her for a moment before the words finally came. He told her everything, every detail, the laughter, the smirk, the way Beth's eyes had slid over him like he was something beneath her feet, Derek's dismissive tone, the assumption that a man covered in grease must be desperate, irresponsible, poor someone who didn't deserve basic respect. He didn't embellish. He didn't dramatize. He spoke quietly, almost clinically, as if relaying a medical chart of someone else's injuries. But Sarah heard the tremor beneath the steadiness. She heard the echo of humiliation he hadn't fully named yet. When he finished, the silence between them trembled like a thin sheet of glass. Sarah reached out and touched his shoulder, her fingers soft, grounding. "Justin," she said softly, "you're the most forgiving person I know. Let it go." He nodded. He even tried to smile for her, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Something inside him had shifted. Not in anger. Justin wasn't a man who ran on anger, but in clarity. Something had crystallized, sharp and undeniable. He didn't want revenge. He didn't want theatrics. He wanted truth. Accountability, a mirror held up to the people who had judged him without knowing a single thing about his worth. They changed for bed eventually, though his movements were slow, automatic. Sarah fell asleep within minutes. Justin watched her breathing steady into peaceful rhythms, her hand resting near his. He wished he could join her in that place of calm, but he couldn't. Long after midnight, with the house swallowed in darkness, he slipped out of bed and returned to his office. He didn't turn on the overhead light, just the warm glow of the desk lamp, which cast a circle of amber around him. His laptop screen lit his face, highlighting the tension in his jaw, the exhaustion he couldn't shake. He began to research. At first, it was simple curiosity: names, backgrounds, the kind of surface-level information anyone could find in minutes. But then curiosity turned into patterns. Patterns turned into connections. Connections turned into truths. Beth Morrison. Her family name alone carried weight. Morrison Real Estate. Multi-generational wealth. Magazine spreads about legacy philanthropy. Photos of her at charity galas, always in shimmering dresses, always surrounded by people who looked just like her. Smiling for cameras, holding champagne flutes, speaking about community uplift while never setting foot in the communities she claimed to champion. Then he found the nonprofit board she served on Community First Foundation. Its mission statement spoke about helping underprivileged youth, empowering marginalized communities. But the photos told another story. Gala attendees, almost entirely white. Diversity, one or two strategically placed guests, always near the front of the camera frame. Justin stared at a group photo for a long moment. Beth stood in the center, pearls around her neck, her smile wide, radiant, self-satisfied. Surrounded by people who clapped for themselves after writing checks that never reached the places they claimed to serve. His chest tightened. Then, he found a video clip from last year. Beth at a podium, her voice smooth and rehearsed as she said, "We believe in giving opportunities to those less fortunate. It is our duty to guide them toward better futures." Justin closed his eyes. The irony burned like acid. Less fortunate. Opportunities. Guide them. She had laughed at him. She had dismissed him. She had humiliated him, publicly, gleefully, instinctively. And then he researched Derek. 15 years at the bank. Not a single promotion in the last 8 years. Multiple customer complaints filed quietly. Phrases like selective service, unequal treatment, bias concerns. Nothing had ever stuck. Nothing had been pursued. He was protected by tenure, by connections, by the kind of system that overlooked certain behaviors, as long as the numbers stayed clean. Justin leaned back, rubbing his palms over his face, exhaustion and clarity intertwining. This wasn't just one bad moment. This was a pattern, a mindset, a rot hidden under polish and paperwork. His phone buzzed on the desk. At first, he ignored it. Then he glanced down and saw the name, Marcus, his childhood friend, his coup. The person who would always hear the truth in Justin's voice, even when Justin tried to hide it. Justin answered quietly. "Man," Marcus said immediately, skipping any greeting, "I heard what happened at the bank. You okay?" Justin stared at the photos on his screen, Beth smiling in a dress that cost more than some families' rent. Derek shaking hands at a charity function he had no actual interest in. His voice, when it finally came, was soft, but firm, unshakably firm. "I'm going to teach them," Justin said, "what assumptions cost." The words weren't vengeful. They were purposeful, measured. A vow spoken in the quiet of a room lit by a single lamp. By a man who had been humiliated not because of who he was, but because of who they believed he wasn't. And that belief was about to cost them more than they ever expected. Justin arrived at Tech Vantage early that Monday morning, the air still cool, the building quiet enough that he could hear the faint hum of the servers several floors below. He had slept little, and it showed only in the heaviness behind his eyes, not in his posture. Something inside him had settled into a calm, deliberate resolve. When the executive board gathered, some curious, some still half awake, he stood at the head of the table and spoke in a voice that carried no anger, only intention. He announced the new initiative as if it had existed for years, a $10 million fund dedicated to creating community tech education centers across underserved neighborhoods in Atlanta. The room went still. Even for Tech Vantage, it was a massive commitment. Marcus, seated near the center of the polished oak table, leaned back slightly, eyebrows raised. He knew Justin better than anyone in that room, knew his heart, his ethics, his battles, but he also knew when something wasn't just philanthropy. This had weight behind it. This had purpose. Justin continued, outlining the plan with calm precision. He emphasized partnership with local foundations, stressing the need for transparency, sustainability, and genuine community engagement. And then, with an almost casual tone, he added one more line. He wanted Community First Foundation included on the proposal list. Marcus glanced at him again, this time more searchingly. Justin didn't look back. 2 days later, Justin received confirmation. Beth's assistant called with a voice drenched in polished enthusiasm, saying Miss Morrison was thrilled about the opportunity, honored that Tech Vantage considered her foundation. Justin thanked her with a politeness that gave nothing away. The meeting was set for the following week, hosted not at Tech Vantage, not at a neutral venue, but in the conference room of Whitmore Private Bank. Derek received the booking request at 8:12 a.m. on a Wednesday. His coffee was still too hot to drink. When he saw the name Tech Vantage Industries, his stomach dropped. When he saw the name beneath it, Justin Cole, his hands trembled so badly he had to set the mug down before it shattered. He sat there for a full minute, staring at the screen, heart pounding like he'd run up 5 flights of stairs. He knew this wasn't a coincidence. He knew he had to accept the booking. Refusing wasn't an option. He clicked approve, then wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead, even though the office temperature was a steady 68 degrees. The day of the meeting, the bank's conference room looked like it belonged on the cover of a financial magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows, polished marble table, quiet air purifiers humming like distant insects. The air smelled faintly of citrus wood polish. Derek paced near the corner, pretending to check the projector settings, his shirt sticking to his lower back despite the air conditioning. Beth entered 10 minutes early, dressed in a pristine white Chanel suit that gleamed under the soft lighting. Her confidence radiated outward, controlled, rehearsed. This was her battlefield presentations, donors, polished facades of generosity. She carried a leather portfolio, smiling the crisp smile of someone used to admiration. She set her materials down and surveyed the room as if she owned it. She had prepared an elaborate presentation, full-color visuals, economic impact projections, a detailed timeline, everything designed to position Community First Foundation as the polished, socially responsible face of Atlanta wealth. She felt good no, triumphant. A partnership with Tech Vantage would elevate her brand. It would solidify her status in circles that mattered. When the door opened again, she straightened automatically. Justin walked in, not in the grease-stained work clothes she remembered from the bank lobby, not looking like the man she had once dismissed without a moment's hesitation. Today, he wore a tailored Tom Ford suit, midnight black, with subtle sheen, fitting him with a precision that made him look like he belonged in boardrooms across the world. He carried no briefcase, only a tablet and a quiet, unshakable presence. He didn't rush. He didn't try to command attention. He simply walked in, and it was enough to shift the air in the room. Beth's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, barely perceptible, but it was there. Her breath caught in her throat with the memory of her own laughter echoing in that lobby. She recovered quickly, smoothing her expression into polite warmth. "Mr. Cole," she said, stepping forward with her hand extended, "what a pleasure to formally meet you." He looked at her hand. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 long, silent seconds. Then he shook it lightly, briefly, before withdrawing his hand with calm neutrality. No hostility, just a measured distance that made her stomach tighten. "Miss Morrison," he said with a quiet nod, voice steady, unreadable. Beth forced a smile, though something inside her had begun to unravel, thread by thread. In the corner, Derek watched with growing dread. Sweat gathered at his temples. Every time Justin shifted his gaze, Derek's pulse hammered louder. He tried to stand still, but his fingers tapped anxiously against the folder he held. Justin took his seat without ceremony, as if the room belonged to him. He didn't have to say it. The knowledge was already alive in everyone's chest. The balance of power had shifted. And as Beth prepared to begin, clearing her throat, smoothing her notes, Justin folded his hands and waited calmly, patiently, like a man who already knew the truth. This meeting wasn't about charity. It was about consequences. Beth began her presentation with the confidence of someone used to holding rooms captive. She clicked through slides filled with glossy photographs, children smiling in after-school programs, volunteers in matching shirts handing out tablets, neatly curated charts showing rising success metrics. Her voice carried a polished warmth, the kind she had perfected at charity galas and fundraising dinners. She spoke of outreach, impact, vision. Words she knew always landed well, especially with corporate donors who preferred Polish over scrutiny. Justin sat across from her, posture relaxed, expression unreadable. He took notes with slow, deliberate movements, never interrupting, never reacting. His stillness only made the room feel more fragile. Marcus watched from the side, sensing the charge in the air, something tightly wound, waiting. When Beth finished a particularly impressive segment about projected community engagement, Justin finally spoke. "Impressive numbers, Miss Morrison, truly." His voice was calm, low, steady. "Tell me about your target demographics." Beth brightened, pleased with the question. "We focus on at-risk youth in underserved communities," she replied, her tone smooth and practiced. "Primarily in areas needing technological accessibility and mentorship." Justin nodded slowly. "I see. And how many members of your board come from those communities?" Her smile didn't break, but it stiffened just enough for anyone paying close attention to notice the strain underneath. "Well," she began, adjusting a strand of hair behind her ear, "we believe in bringing experienced leadership to ensure long-term guidance and structure." "So none," Justin said quietly. Not harshly, not with accusation. Simply a fact stated into the air. Beth's throat bobbed slightly before she forced another smile. "Our board is composed of highly qualified individuals with strong professional backgrounds. Many of them donate significant personal funds." Justin didn't let her finish. "How many program participants have you personally mentored, Miss Morrison?" The question lingered like a sudden cold draft. Even the soft hum of the air purifier seemed to fade. Derek, standing in the corner, swallowed hard. He could almost feel the temperature drop. Beth shifted in her seat, the subtle tremor in her exhale betraying her discomfort. "Mr. Cole, I chair multiple committees," she said, her voice a shade too defensive. "My time is ... I do what I can." "I oversee. Your time is valuable," Justin said gently. "I understand." His tone wasn't mocking, but it cut all the same. Everyone in the room could sense it, the careful control behind his words, the restraint of someone who had been dismissed one too many times and was now holding the mirror up. "Just one more question," he added. He reached into his leather folder and slid a thin stack of papers across the glossy conference table. The folder stopped directly in front of Beth. She stared at it for a moment, then opened it with trembling fingers. Her breath stopped. Inside were photographs taken 2 weeks earlier. Beth standing at the entrance of the Ashton Ridge Country Club, body angled away from a black family dressed in evening attire. The father had extended a membership card. Beth's face, caught mid-expression, was unmistakably disgusted. She wasn't hiding her disdain. She had never expected anyone to capture it. Derek closed his eyes. Marcus's jaw tightened. The silence in the room thickened like fog. Justin spoke softly. "This club just serve on the membership committee, correct?" Beth's lips parted soundlessly before she managed. That photo was taken out of context. There was a misunderstanding about membership requirements." "Of course," Justin replied, his voice calm enough to make her tremble. "I'm sure there was." He stood then, smoothing the front of his suit jacket. The chair legs made a quiet sound against the floor, but in the heavy silence it echoed. "Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Morrison. We'll be in touch." Beth tried to gather her materials with hands that would barely obey her. Her nails clicked anxiously against the polished table. The confident woman who had walked in wearing Chanel and certainty had been replaced by someone small, shaken, scrambling to hold the edges of her composure. Justin reached the door before pausing. He looked back at her, not with cruelty, not with triumph, but with a depth she couldn't read, something old and wounded and resolute all at once. "Oh, and Miss Morrison?" he said, voice steady. "I'm a mechanic who checks his balance, remember?" Her eyes widened with something between shame and fear, a recognition that went deeper than any public embarrassment. It touched the part of her that still replayed her own laughter in the lobby, the moment she had looked at him and seen no worth at all. He didn't wait for a response. He simply left the room, the door closing gently behind him. The quiet sound felt louder than any slam, and Beth, staring at the photographs still lying open before her, understood something she had never imagined. This wasn't just a meeting. It was the first strike. Beth burst into Derek's office just minutes after the meeting ended, her heels striking the polished floor with sharp, frantic clicks. Her hair, usually perfectly arranged, was slightly out of place, and her breath came in uneven pulls. She slammed the door behind her and pointed a trembling finger at him. "Do you know what he just did to me?" she hissed, voice cracking at the edges. "Do you have any idea what that man just put me through?" Derek stood from his chair, startled by the wild panic in her eyes. He had seen Beth angry, annoyed, irritated, entitled, but this was different. This was fear. A deep, unsteady fear she didn't know how to hide. "Beth," he said carefully, "maybe we should apologize. Maybe we should try to make this right." "Apologize?" She laughed sharply, the sound strained and hollow. "To him? Do you know who my family is? Do you understand what this means for me?" But even as she spoke, the certainty she tried to project faltered. Her voice wavered, her posture sagged, and the veneer of superiority she clung to began to crack. Derek could see it happen in real time, the unraveling of a woman who had always assumed she was untouchable. Before he could respond, she stormed out, leaving the scent of expensive perfume and anxiety behind. Later that afternoon, Beth's phone rang. She recognized the number immediately. Ashton Ridge Country Club. Her sanctuary. Her stage. Her proof of belonging. She answered quickly, forcing brightness into her voice. "Hello, Charles. How are you?" But the president's tone was grave. "Beth, we need to discuss your position on the membership committee." Her stomach dropped. Of course. Is something wrong?" There was a long pause, one that made her grip tighten around her phone until her knuckles whitened. "Someone sent the board evidence of discriminatory practices," Charles said, choosing his words with painful precision, including photographs. "Several complaints have resurfaced. We can't overlook this." Her heart thudded painfully. "Charles, you know my family has—" "Beth," he said gently but firmly, "your family name can't protect you from this." She felt something break inside her, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like a crack forming deep beneath the surface, the kind that only grows with time. Across the city, Justin sat in his office with Marcus, the room dimly lit except for the glow of the city skyline behind him. Justin looked calmer than he felt, his fingers tapping absently against the desk. "Phase 1 is complete," Justin said. "But I'm not done." Marcus studied him, concern heavy in his expression. "Man, be careful. Revenge can consume you, even if you don't see it happening." Justin looked up, eyes steady. "This isn't revenge, Marcus. It's education." But Marcus wasn't convinced. He saw the way Justin's jaw tightened when he spoke, how his thoughts seemed to spiral inward. The hurt from the bank, small to some, invisible to others, had grown roots inside him. Marcus understood. Pain had a way of twisting itself into purpose, sometimes into obsession. That evening, in a quiet suburban kitchen, Derek sat hunched over the table with a half-empty glass of whiskey. He didn't drink often. When he did, it usually meant something was deeply wrong. His wife, Anna, walked in and paused at the doorway. "Honey, what's wrong?" He rubbed his hands over his face, feeling the shame burn beneath his skin. "I messed up," he whispered, voice hoarse. "At work, with a customer. With a man I judged before he even opened his mouth." Anna pulled out a chair and sat beside him. "What happened?" he told her. Every detail, the laughter, the humiliation he helped cause. The way Justin had stood there, covered in grease, simply asking to check his balance, and how Derek had looked at him and seen something less. When he finished, he couldn't look up. "I don't know why I did it," he said quietly. "I don't know when I became someone who could do that." Anna stared at him for a long moment, the pain in her eyes cutting deeper than any reprimand. "Derek," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper, "that's not who I married. Fix this." He swallowed hard. I don't know how." But he knew one thing. He couldn't carry this alone anymore. Justin was in his own kitchen when the email arrived. The subject line made him pause. A conversation about dignity. He opened it slowly. Derek had written only a few lines, but they were heavy with sincerity, remorse, and something else. Fear, perhaps, or humility. He requested a private meeting, not at the bank, not in an office, but somewhere neutral. Somewhere human. Justin read the email twice, then a third time. For the first time that day, something inside him soft. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the faint recognition that people could still change if given a chance. He closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair. Outside, the city lights shimmered against the night sky. But Justin felt a different kind of illumination beginning inside him, a quiet shift he didn't fully understand yet. But he would, because his story wasn't done unraveling. Justin arrived at the small coffee shop on the east side of town, place intentionally chosen for its anonymity. No corporate suits here, no polished marble floors, no whispers of wealth or scrutiny. Just scratched wooden tables, the soft hum of an espresso machine, and a quiet that felt safer than any bank lobby. He walked in and immediately spotted Derek sitting near the back. The man looked nothing like the sharply dressed, self-assured bank manager he had been days ago. His shoulders were slumped, his tie missing, his collar wrinkled as though he had pulled at it repeatedly. His eyes, normally sharp and calculating, were red-rimmed, tired, holding the weight of sleepless nights and choices he couldn't undo. When Derek saw Justin approach, he stood abruptly, almost knocking over his half-finished coffee. "Mr. Cole," he said, voice tight, "I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not even asking for it. But I need you to know I'm ashamed." She didn't respond right away. He simply sat down, slowly, his movements calm but guarded. He folded his hands on the table and waited, giving Derek the space to continue if he truly meant to. The silence stretched for several seconds, long enough for Derek to visibly swallow his nerves. "I worked at Whitmore Bank for 15 years, Derek began, his voice low. 15 years of culture, of expectations, of knowing exactly which clients I was supposed to prioritize and which ones I wasn't." He gave a hollow, humorless laugh. "You learned the codes, the language. How to smile while turning someone away." He looked down at his hands as though suddenly ashamed of them. "It doesn't excuse what I did to you, not even close. But I want you to understand the environment that made me think my behavior was normal." Justin remained still, his expression unreadable, but not harsh. He was listening, really listening, and that alone seemed to make Derek tremble even more. "It was easy," Derek whispered. "Too easy. It's to justify things. To think, oh, this is what management expects, or this is how it's always been." And then one day, his voice cracked. "One day I was laughing at a man who was only trying to check his balance." Justin's gaze softened, not completely, but slightly. "And now," Derek continued, "I want to help make this right, if you'll let me." Justin leaned back, studying him. He saw no arrogance left, no defensiveness. Only a man unraveling, trying painfully to stitch himself back together. He asked quietly, "Tell me about Beth Morrison." "Everything." Derek stiffened, fear flickering across his face. Exposing Beth meant exposing the bank, exposing himself, exposing a system that protected people like her and punished people unlike her. But after a moment, his shoulders dropped in resignation. "Beth's family controls significant investments through Whitmore," he said, voice flat. Everyone treats her like she's untouchable. And she believes she is. Justin didn't interrupt. She's blocked more loans for minority-owned businesses than I can count, Derek continued, always citing risk factors or economic projections. Never mind that the applications were solid. Never mind that many of those applicants had better financials than half the clients she approved. Justin exhaled slowly, jaw tightening, and Derek hesitated. I kept copies. I don't know why. Maybe guilt. Maybe I knew this day would come. Justin's eyes lifted, meeting Derek's with a mixture of surprise and a cautious respect. Derek, he said softly, you're at a crossroads. I know. Derek's voice wavered, but his eyes didn't. I want to choose the right path. Justin held his gaze for a long moment. There was a tenderness in the silence, something almost painful. He remembered all the times Sarah told him he forgave too easily, cared too deeply, trusted too often. Maybe he did. But he also remembered his mother's voice, soft and unwavering, telling him that people only grow when someone believes they can. He breathed in once, deeply. Then help me expose the truth, he finally said. Not just about that day, about the system. Derek blinked, overwhelmed by the weight of that invitation. There's a board meeting next month, he said, clearing his throat. Whitmore's diversity initiatives are up for review. Everything gets presented, every complaint, every pattern. Justin nodded, a spark of purpose lighting in his eyes. Perfect. They stood and walked out together, the winter air brushing against their faces. Derek looked smaller somehow, but not weaker, more like a man learning to shed armor he'd worn for far too long. Before they parted ways, Derek turned to him. Why are you giving me this chance? He asked quietly. After everything I did? Justin looked at him for a long moment, and something warm flickered behind his eyes. Something Derek wasn't expecting. Because my mother taught me everyone deserves the opportunity to be better, Justin said. Don't waste it. Derek nodded, eyes shining with something close to gratitude. Something close to hope. And for the first time, Justin felt a subtle shift inside himself. Not forgiveness, but possibility. A bridge, not yet built, but no longer impossible. Justin had always believed that truth had a texture, something you could feel under your fingertips when you finally brushed against it. Over the next weeks, that texture grew sharper, heavier, undeniable. He and Derek worked in silence most nights, the dim light of Justin's home office stretching shadows across, stacks of documents that felt both incriminating and heartbreaking. Loan applications, internal emails, demographic spreadsheets, numbers that looked clinical until you realized they represented real people, families denied homes, entrepreneurs denied a start, students denied a chance. Every page told a story of someone who had walked into Whitmore Bank with hope and walked out with a wound. Derek handled each file with the same care someone might give to fragile heirlooms. He never spoke unless necessary, afraid his voice would betray him. His hands often shook. Sometimes his breath did too. Justin noticed, but he let Derek find his own pace. Remorse was a journey, not a performance. You understand what this is, right? Justin asked one night, his tone calm but edged with grit. Derek nodded slowly. Systemic discrimination. Patterned, intentional, and protected. He swallowed hard. I was part of it, and I can't undo that, but I can't help reveal it. Justin looked at him longer than usual, as if studying the weight Derek carried. The guilt, the fear, the possibility, however faint, of redemption. Meanwhile, Marcus had been running parallel searches, digging through public records with the persistence of someone who had grown up watching his mother fight for every inch of dignity she had. One evening he rushed into the office, breathless, holding printouts like they were burning his hands. Justin, you need to see this. He spread the documents on the table. Beth's foundation, her pride. Her charitable trophy had received $2 million in community development support from Whitmore Bank. Tax records showed a trickle of actual spending. The rest evaporated into vague administrative costs and consulting fees that looped back to shell companies tied to Beth's family network. Justin's lips pressed into a grim, quiet line. Not shock, confirmation. Of course, he murmured. She wasn't just discriminating. She was benefiting. Sarah often found him here, shoulders tight, eyes burning from lack of sleep. One night, she leaned against the doorway, watching him sift through financial statements like someone searching for answers buried beneath wounds. "Baby," she whispered, her voice threaded with worry. "You're proving your point. Everyone can see it. When does it end?" Justin turned toward her, exhaustion and resolve mixed in his expression. "When the system changes," he said softly, "not just the players." She held his gaze, searching it. "And who changes you while you're trying to change everything else?" He didn't answer. He couldn't, because he didn't know. Across town, Beth felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Calls to her circle of powerful friends, once answered with enthusiasm, now fell into uneasy silence. Some didn't pick up. Some claimed to be traveling. Some spoke to her with the politeness reserved for someone who was already socially dead. Her father, a man known for influence that stretched far beyond Atlanta, called her into his study. He didn't shout. He didn't comfort her. He simply looked at her with a stern clarity she hadn't seen since childhood. "Beth," he said, "whatever you've done, fix it, before it explodes." Fear tightened her throat. She hadn't realized how much she depended on the illusion of invincibility until it slipped. She tried reaching Justin first with calls, then emails, then longer messages where her tone shifted from arrogance to something that sounded almost like pleading. She apologized. She rationalized. She begged. Everything went unanswered. Desperation led her to Tech Vantage headquarters. She arrived trembling, her carefully crafted confidence crumbling under the weight of humiliation she had never learned to withstand. She approached the reception desk where 2 security guards watched her with neutral professionalism. "Ma'am, do you have an appointment?" one asked politely. "No," she breathed. "Tell Justin Cole that Beth Morrison needs to speak with him. Now." The guard made a call. His face didn't change as he listened. Then he hung up slowly. "Mr. Cole says," he recited, "you should check your balance." Beth froze. The words struck her like a slap, sharp, echoing, deeply personal. She knew exactly what they referenced. She knew exactly what she had done to deserve it. Her eyes shimmered with a mixture of shame, anger, and the horrifying realization that she was no longer in control of the narrative. She turned away, muttering something that wasn't quite a thank you. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, each step sounding more hollow than the last. When she reached the parking lot, something waited on her windshield. A plain envelope, no name, no stamp. Her breath hitched as she opened it. Inside were copies of her foundation's financial records, each discrepancy highlighted in unforgiving yellow. Payments she'd hoped no one would trace. Numbers she'd told herself weren't that bad. Choices she had justified as part of the world she lived in. And at the bottom, a single note, written in handwriting she didn't recognize. "The truth always comes out. Board meeting, Whitmore Bank, Tuesday, 2 p.m. Be there." Beth felt her chest tighten, her vision blurring. Because beneath the shock and the humiliation, there was something else, a quiet, terrifying recognition. This time, she couldn't run from the consequences. And for the first time in her life, she would have to face a room where power no longer shielded her. She sank into her car seat, clutching the envelope. The truth was coming. And it carried Justin Cole's calm, relentless, unshakable fingerprints all over it. The Whitmore Bank boardroom had always been a place of polished surfaces and quiet power mahogany tables that gleamed like still water. Leather chairs that whispered with the weight of decisions made by people who believed they controlled the pulse of the city. But today, the air felt different. Thick, expectant, charged. Directors filed in with cautious eyes. Investors murmured to one another, sensing that the meeting was not routine. A handful of local press members stood along the back wall, cameras ready, their presence a warning that whatever happened here would not stay contained. Beth Morrison sat near the center of the long table, rigid as if turned to stone. Her lawyer leaned toward her occasionally, whispering instructions she barely heard. Her hands were clasped too tightly in her lap, the knuckles white, the veins trembling beneath her skin. She stared ahead, trying to breathe steadily, trying not to look like a woman whose world had already begun to crumble. Derek sat several seats away, shoulders curled inward, eyes darting nervously. He looked like a man bracing for a storm he helped create. The meeting opened with routine formality, but no one paid attention. Everyone was waiting for the moment they all sensed was coming. It began when Derek rose to present the annual review of Whitmore's diversity initiatives. The screen lit up behind him, charts, percentages, numbers that should have reflected progress. Instead, they reflected a void. The results were not just poor, they were catastrophic. No measurable improvement in minority lending, Derek said, voice barely steady. No successful implementation of the mentoring program. No upward mobility in the past fiscal year for underrepresented employees. A director muttered, "This can't be right." "It is," Derek said, "and it's only the surface." Before questions could erupt, the door opened. Justin Cole stepped inside. He didn't rush, he didn't posture. He walked with the quiet certainty of someone who had nothing to prove and everything to expose. He carried only a single leather folder, worn at the edges, like something he'd held on to for far longer than he wished. The room shifted subtly, straightened backs, sucked in breaths, a few whispers. He was, after all, one of Whitmore Bank's largest clients, even if they had failed to recognize him when it mattered most. The board chairman forced a courteous smile. "Mr. Cole, thank you for joining us. Your perspective as a valued client." Justin's voice cut cleanly through the room. "I'm not here as a client," he said. "I'm here as evidence." The chairman blinked, the smile collapsing. Confusion rippled outward, directors glancing at one another. Investors whispering, the press straightening with predatory focus. Justin opened the folder and placed a small drive on the table. "I requested copies of the security footage from the day I came in to check my balance." A director frowned. "I don't understand." "You will." The footage appeared on the screen. The grainy image showed Justin walking toward the counterclothes smeared with grease from the car he had been repairing. Worry written in the lines around his mouth. Then came the audio, laughter, whispered mockery, the assumption that he didn't belong there, the tone of dismissal that cut sharper than any insult. And Beth's face caught in perfect clarity, smirking, eyes narrowed with superiority. Her voice dripping with disdain. The room went so silent it hurt. Justin let the footage play, his expression unreadable. When it ended, he stepped closer to the table. "This isn't about me," he said quietly. "This is about pattern and practice. What happened to me happens every day. To people who don't have the privilege, resources, or platform I do." He looked at Derek, giving him a subtle nod. Derek rose again, his hands trembling visibly. "I have 15 years of documented evidence to support Mr. Cole's claims." He began projecting loan records applications from Black and Latino business owners with strong credit, solid financials, promising plans, rejected without cause. Then came the approvals. Less qualified white applicants, some with poor credit, some with unstable income, some whose only merit was a familiar last name. Derek cleared his throat, voice cracking. "These are patterns created by internal pressure to serve the right clients. Pressure I enforced. Pressure I apologize for." Names began appearing, and one name appeared more than any other. Beth Morrison. Her fingerprints were on approval chains that made no financial sense. on rejections that masked discrimination behind vague terms like insufficient stability and risk profile. Then came the next slide. Her foundation's financial records. Projected larger than life, each discrepancy circled in red, each fraudulent allocation undeniable. Beth rose abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Her voice shook with fury. "This is a witch hunt. My family has banked here for 3 generations. You think you can tear that down with—" Justin turned to her, his eyes steady but not cruel. "And how many generations have been locked out because of people like you?" The words hung in the air, heavy, deserved, irreversible. Chaos followed. Directors talking over one another. Investors demanding answers. Reporters snapping photos as fast as their cameras could process. Some board members stood to distance themselves. Others leaned forward, faces tight with concern or shame or quiet recognition. The chairman slammed the gavel down. "Order! We will proceed with an emergency vote for an immediate and independent investigation." Beth's father, seated farther down the room, stood slowly. He didn't speak, didn't touch her, didn't even glance her way. He simply buttoned his coat and walked out. Beth watched him leave with a stiffness that looked like heartbreak disguised as defiance. Derek received notice of his temporary suspension pending review, but everyone in the room understood his records would be indispensable. As the meeting dissolved into fragments, voices, footsteps, scattered papers, Beth approached Justin. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, the kind that come not from innocence, but from the sudden collapse of a world built on privilege. "You've destroyed everything I built," she whispered. Justin didn't flinch. His voice was calm, almost gentle, but unwavering. "No," he said. "I revealed what you built. There's a difference." Her lips trembled as if she wanted to say more: plead, rage, undo, but there was nothing left to say. She turned away, shoulders shaking as she walked out of the room that once belonged to her family. And for the first time, the truth, clear, undeniable, sat at the head of the table. 3 months later, the world felt different, lighter in some places, heavier in others. Whitmore Bank, stripped of its old guard, stood under new leadership that spoke in careful tones about equity and reform. The lobby no longer bore the silent chill of unspoken hierarchy. It simply felt like a bank again, not a gatekeeper of who deserved dignity and who didn't. Federal investigations were underway, and Derek, once a cog in the discriminatory machine, now sat in courtrooms and conference rooms, testifying with a quiet steadiness. He didn't try to excuse his past decisions. He didn't try to soften them. He simply told the truth, piece by piece, letting the record finally reflect reality. Beth's foundation had been dissolved by court order, every misused dollar tracked, reclaimed, and redistributed into legitimate community programs, after-school tutoring, microloans for first-generation entrepreneurs, trauma counseling, neighborhood tech initiatives, things she should have done from the beginning. Now, stripped of her board positions, indicted on fraud charges, and abandoned by the very social circle that once praised her last name, Beth lived in the quiet margin of a life she used to believe was unshakable. Her mansion had been listed quietly. Her phone no longer buzzed with invitations. She, too, was living inside the consequences she once believed would never touch her. Meanwhile, sunlight spilled across a wide-open lot on the south side of Atlanta where Justin Cole stood before a crowd. A brand-new building rose behind him, glass walls gleaming like hope itself, steel frames strong enough to hold the weight of dreams long delayed. The Cole Community Tech Center, the first of 10 he planned to build. Children and teens filled the space: black, white, Asian, Latino, every shade, every background. Some wore hand-me-down sneakers, others still carried the dust of their morning shifts. But their eyes all held the same spark: curiosity, possibility, the hunger to learn something that no one could ever take away from them. Justin's heart tightened as he looked at them. He had been so many things in his life: student, worker, CEO, fighter, target. But today, he was something he never expected: a builder of futures. A ribbon stretched across the entrance, flanked by community leaders who were still trying to wrap their minds around a man who preferred work boots to luxury shoes, who spoke softly but changed systems loudly. Beside him stood Sarah, radiant with pride. She slipped her hand into his, letting her thumb trace the back of his knuckles the way she always did when she wanted him to know he wasn't carrying anything alone. "You changed the system, baby," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. He looked at her, the crowd reflected in her eyes. "We're changing it," he corrected gently. "It's not done yet." In the third row, Marcus stood with a wide grin, clipboard in hand, already answering a dozen questions from community partners. He had become the operational backbone of the Cole Foundation, ensuring every cent of Justin's $10 million commitment reached the people who needed it most. Justin trusted him with the mission as deeply as he trusted him with his life. And near the back of the crowd, almost hiding, but not quite, stood Derek. He looked different, not in appearance, but in posture. He no longer shrank from the truth. He seemed to stand inside it, shoulders straighter, eyes clearer. He watched the ceremony from a distance, as though unsure whether he was welcome, but unwilling to stay away. After the applause faded, after the ribbon was cut and the first wave of kids rushed inside, exploring the computer labs and mentorship rooms, Derek approached Justin with hesitant steps. "I don't expect friendship," Derek said quietly, stopping a respectful distance away. "But thank you for letting me testify, for letting the truth matter." Justin took a measured breath, absorbing the weight of a man trying to rebuild himself from the inside out. "You chose truth over comfort," Justin said. "Most people never do." "That took courage." Derek nodded, eyes glistening. I got a job offer, community credit union down off Chastain. They want me to help restructure their lending practices. Give people a chance who've been turned away by places like Whitmore." He swallowed hard. "I think it's the first time I've felt proud of what I'm doing." Justin extended his hand. "Not as a friend, but as something better. An ally." Derek hesitated only a second before taking it, gripping it like a man accepting a lifeline he intended to earn every day going forward. Later that evening, the ceremony behind him and the noise of the crowd replaced by the familiar hum of evening cicadas, Justin returned home. The garage smelled like oil and warm metal, the scents that grounded him. The 1967 Mustang, after months of work, sat gleaming beneath the overhead lights. Its engine purred perfectly when he turned the key, the sound smooth and full, as if the car itself was relieved to be whole again. Grease smeared across his hands, forearms, and even his cheek. And for the first time in a long time, Justin felt completely at peace. Not triumphant, not victorious, just steady, present, whole. Sarah appeared in the doorway holding 2 cups of coffee, her silhouette framed by the soft golden light of the kitchen behind her. "You never did tell me," she said, leaning against the garage doorframe with a soft smile. "Why classic cars?" Justin chuckled, wiping his hands on a rag. "Because something broken and underestimated can become extraordinary," he said. "You just have to see its true value before anyone else does." Before she could respond, his phone buzzed on the workbench. A news alert. He picked it up, expecting another headline about the tech center opening. But the words on the screen made him still. "Whitmore Bank settles. Discrimination suit. $50 million fund established for minority business loans." Sarah stepped closer, reading over his shoulder. Her breath caught. "You did it." Justin shook his head gently. "We all did it. Derek, Marcus, the people who came forward, everyone who refused to stay silent." He set the phone down and stepped outside for a moment, letting the cool night air wash over him. Stars stretched across the sky, quiet and eternal. The same stars he had looked at months ago when he was covered in grease and humiliation. Standing outside Whitmore Bank, wondering how much dignity a person was expected to swallow in a single lifetime. But now, he knew something different. That humiliation had been the spark, not of revenge, but of transformation. Tomorrow, 5 new interns from underserved neighborhoods would walk into TechVantage for the first time, nervous and excited. Tomorrow, 3 minority-owned businesses would receive their first bank approvals, doors finally opening that had been closed for decades. Tomorrow, the system would bend a little more toward justice. And maybe, just maybe, he thought, systems like old cars, like people, could be rebuilt. Not icily, not quickly, but truthfully. Justin picked up his wrench again, moving beneath another classic car waiting its turn. The world might never be perfect, but some things were worth the effort to restore properly. And he was just getting started. If you enjoyed this story and want more powerful narratives like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel.